Yeah, well, welcome to the Junior Developer Link. This is Chris. I started the business, the Developer Link, with my business partner Mike, just over a couple of years ago now. And we realised very quickly we're a software engineering specialist recruitment company, and we realised that there wasn't really much out there for juniors and entry level developers. So we wanted to make a community and kind of utilize our network and the people that we know to really help people get into the industry and kind of advance their careers. So we've been reaching out to our network and happily connected with Ben, who's joined us today for this podcast. So Ben, I can't remember where I saw it. I think he was sharing a bunch of different sort of junior posts. I saw Ben. We'll go into that in a second, but welcome Ben.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So Ben is software engineering manager over at Planet Argon, a Ruby on Rails development agency. And yeah, I guess first of all, tell me a bit about that, Ben. I saw you kind of posting a list of junior and kind of entry level jobs that I got shared. So I guess how did that come about?
Yeah, well, I got that idea. I can't say that it was my own idea. I can't take credit. When I was first getting started in software development and trying to land my first job, I was in a group of junior developers, and we were all in the same position, job hunting, sharing skills and resources and things. And one of the women in that group almost every day posted like 20 or 30 jobs that she'd found the previous night. And there was always a hesitancy I felt amongst the group to share possible links and possible opportunities, just because it was like, well, if everyone else in this group is applying, then does that reduce my chances?
Yeah,
And when she started sharing those and everyone else started sharing, it just became this really collaborative effort. And so I sort of, when I finally did get a job, decided that is something that I could pass on and like kind of pay forward. And it takes literally like 10 or 15 minutes once a week to go to LinkedIn and look for jobs and post them. And I've had some people say that they've gotten gigs, they've gotten their jobs from those lists. So
amazing.
was very, very excited to hear that news. And yeah, I just thought this is minimal effort with possibly a very big payoff for someone.
Yeah, like you said, like it's not necessarily that you're expecting someone to get a job every week, right? But
Right.
even if one person from you doing that 10, 15 minutes a week ends up getting a job or ends up getting even like interviews and things like that,
Right.
that's awesome for you to be doing that. And that's similar to why we started this. I think I've been in recruitment for sort of 10 years, and the majority of people that we speak to have been in development, sometimes even longer. And people want to kind of help the next wave of developers, and I think a lot of people struggled getting that first job. And I think little things like you said, sort of sharing adverts and things like that can really help. So I think it's awesome that you're doing that. So let's tell me a little bit about yourself then. Did you go to an academy, or are you a kind of computer science grad, or?
Not a computer science grad. I went to college for English, specifically journalism. So writer by trade. And um, when I came out of college, I newspapers in the U.S. and I guess kind of all over the country or all over the world were not doing so well. So I used my skills to get some copywriting gigs, some blogging opportunities, and ended up working pretty full time on blogs for like an SEO digital marketing agency, and that was kind of my first step into the technology world. Um, and from there, I have had project management jobs, Scrum Master roles, producer roles for digital agencies, and went to a a coding boot camp that was focused on the MERN stack. And after that, did some contract development work, and then got my position here as manager at Pine & Argo.
Amazing. And we kind of chose the topic together, but you went for onboarding. So why did you choose that topic?
So onboarding is or can be a struggle for new developers, and I think it's something specifically that junior developers, because they don't have any or very little experience, can really struggle with and find themselves, especially if the onboarding process at a company is not very good, really disheartened or dismayed at. And that's a horrible way to start a new job is to get on somewhere and be like, oh, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. And so I think that there's being in a hiring position and an onboarding position now myself, there's a number of things that we try to do to make that process as smooth as possible. But there's also a lot of things that I see people coming in having done already that I think is great. And on the flip side of that, things that I kind of wish that people had done prior to them starting on their first day. So I think that yes, it's up to the company that you're joining to have a good onboarding process. However, there are things that you can do, especially as a junior, to set yourself up for success, regardless of the onboarding process as it's laid out at the company.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think a lot of the time, particularly in the midst of the search, having graduated a boot camp, like it kind of feels like the getting the job part is the big bit, right? Like that seems like the big hurdle to get over. And sometimes I guess
Right.
people might get it, and then all of a sudden be like, oh no, like I'm finally starting in like a couple of weeks. Like, and a lot of people, assuming it's similar to yourself, never worked in a software development environment before. Some never worked in a company before. So, like you said, it's a big jump. And so, say I'm a junior developer. I've just found a new job, maybe off one of the links that you've shared. I thank Ben, and then I'm getting prepared for day one. Like, what do I need to do to kind of get prepared for day one at my new job?
Let's see. So I would say that the first thing that you should probably be doing, and this is things that most people do prior to interviews, so you probably have done it already, is to research the company. There's a number of different ways you can go about researching it, depending on what you're trying to figure out. But I tend to like to encourage people, especially juniors, to research 3 different areas: the team, the projects or the products that the company is working on, and then I guess diving more into the team, like the backgrounds of people on the team. So the projects and the products is probably the most important thing. You know, if it's an agency, you want to look at some of their past work, who their past clients are. You can look online to see if there's reviews from anyone. And similar for if it's a product, you know, what's the history of that product? Have they released any new features recently? Do they have any planned that they've announced? And how have the features in the product as it's been rolled out so far been received? That's all really good information to have coming into a job. The other 2 would be the team and the makeup of the team. So I would go in generally understanding how the team is structured. You know, you probably know your hiring manager. You might know the names of some of the people that you are going to be working with immediately. But if you could figure out how the company is structured as a whole, a little bit in a larger scale, that's great. Gives you a better understanding of who you should talk to about what, and can maybe help facilitate onboarding conversations a little easier. And then just go sort of poke around on LinkedIn and find out who these people are as people, I suppose. Give yourself something to talk about with them when you finally do meet them, especially if it's a remote position or a distributed team. You'll definitely want to have like prepared things, because nothing can be more awkward than getting on a Zoom call with someone you've never met and you don't have any idea, and your boss is like, okay, go meet with that person and talk about something. So just, doing a little due diligence and stalking them a little bit on LinkedIn is a very good place to start.
Yeah, for sure. Would you ever recommend, or have you ever, I guess, had from the reverse side, have you ever had people like join your team and like message you like before they start to be like, hey, like I'm gonna be joining, or would you recommend it to kind of come on day one but have done the research?
I think that if there's a reason to be doing that, or okay, let me backpedal. That's not a bad thing to do at all. I would say reaching out before you start and saying, "Hey, I'm the new person on the team. Just want to introduce myself." That's really great. That's proactive. It's friendly, and it opens that door for conversations to be had during the first couple of weeks, anyways. But it's also kind of above and beyond. There's a lot that you might be doing before you start on your first day. And also, if you've had a really long job search, you might just want to like take some time to breathe before you start. So
Yeah.
I would say maybe that's lower on the priority list. But I would definitely, if you already know like who your manager is, who people on the team, maybe like a tech lead for a project that you're going to be working on, definitely reach out to them. Say, hey, excited to be working with you. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to prepare in advance. And yeah, just opening that door is a great way to start that relationship for sure.
For sure. I guess we have it from our side. Sometimes we'll offer people, and it'll be a little while before they're going to be starting. So,
Mm-hmm.
like we as a company always encourage, like we try and meet with them like once a month or like kind of every few weeks, and try and just like keep the conversation like fresh.
Mm-hmm.
Like say for example, someone I know sometimes companies like to bring two or three people on at a time,
Right.
or things like that, and it won't necessarily be straight away or within a couple of weeks they'll be starting. Would you recommend kind of reaching out for a bit of a catch up if they had like a delayed start?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that any time that you want any opportunity to remind the people that are hiring you that you are being hired and you're being
Yeah,
brought onto the team is good. Keeps you fresh in their mind. There's often also a lot of onboarding work and like pre-onboarding work that a hiring manager might be need to do, or a tech lead or some sort of team lead might need to do. And honestly, like I drop the ball sometimes when I'm bringing on a new developer. I have a huge checklist of things that I'm supposed to be doing, and excuse me, it's not necessarily that I'm like flaking on it, but I might have other things that take up my time. And so, hearing from the new hire before they even join, saying, "Hey, really excited. Is there anything you need from me?" Or when am I going to get access to my email? Or should I have Slack access by now? Or anything like that. It might come across as a little pushy, and I'm sure there's people that might take it that way. But for me, it's actually a very nice reminder, and it's sort of like, oh yeah, I need to get on that. And it helps me not slip. It helps some of the pre-onboarding stuff not slip off my radar too much.
yeah, for sure. Because it can almost be sort of out of sight, out of mind, can't it? If
Yeah.
someone's not actually physically working there, you're kind of waiting for them to start, and it's kind of like, oh, I need to get their laptop ready. I need access to like this system, this system, this system, this system, and I can't tell you how many times I've done it. I've decided to do it a week before, and I've done it in the morning of
Mm-hmm.
people starting. Like it always ends up happening. But if you got like a little bit of a nudge to be like, hey, like, is there anything I need to do in prep for like next week, or even like my laptop's not arrived, like all of that kind of stuff. Like I think being proactive about it from that sense I definitely find useful anyway from my side.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. And then, so talk to me about, I guess, sort of processes. There's obviously a lot of different best practices when it comes to sort of software development. Which ones should I be learning right away as a new developer going into a team that I'm getting onboarded on?
Sure. So process, this is going to be like, I'm going to say all this stuff, but then of course, every team is going to have different processes and different best practices and stuff. So big grain of salt with all of the following. I found that a lot of juniors, especially ones that are coming out of boot camp, depending on the boot camp, really have focused on diving deep into the language or the frameworks that they're going to be working in, and that's it. And that's very understandable, right? They're learning to become software developers, so they are focusing on learning how to code. What's really helpful, though, for me as a manager is if a junior comes in with some understanding of sort of the ancillary tools and processes that are part of becoming a software development team or being a professional software developer. So some examples of these would be Git. You'd be surprised how many juniors that I talk to coming out of boot camps, especially, like, have very limited understanding of Git, understanding how to resolve merge conflicts, even submitting PRs. That's a huge one. It's basically just showcasing, yes, I can work on a development team, not just in my own tiny little project that I've been only one contributing to. Work estimation is another big one. A lot of times this isn't covered in boot camps or even like CS courses, just for lots of reasons. But if you've studied ticket estimation, you know a little bit about Agile and Scrum, and you kind of have an idea of how you personally estimate the effort that it would take to complete something. Going in with that knowledge is really great. There's going to be very specific project or company processes and best practices that they will want you to follow. But starting from your own sort of philosophy or best practice is a really great way to be able to adapt to theirs really quickly. Let's see. Writing tests, TDD, having a good understanding of test-driven development and why you're writing the test, the value that it brings is important. Again, different companies are going to have different requirements, testing requirements, and like coverage goals and stuff. But if you have just the basic understanding of that philosophy, that's important. And then I would say a really overlooked one that is also very valuable is time management. So how do you as a developer know that you are going down a rabbit hole? How do you know when it's time to ask for help? Do you use a Pomodoro timer? That sort of thing. If you can come onto a development team and I can trust that I can assign you something and you're going to work on it for a reasonable amount of time and then ask for help and not spend, like an entire work week spinning your wheels without asking for assistance, that's really great.
I think that's one of the things that I think can be the hardest, right? Like, particularly like you said with remote teams, it's kind of like from the developer's perspective, it's like knowing when to ask questions when you're stuck versus like giving it enough of a go, and like that's always the hard line between the two, isn't it? And I've tried every single type of time management tool you can think of. Like my colleagues will tell you, myself, I have probably about 15 different to-do lists with probably a lot of them have the same thing on. So I'm constantly trying to improve that. But the Pomodoro timer is one that I have used and it has worked a lot. So I can vouch for that. And then so then going on to I guess the company specific sort of like projects and products and kind of familiarizing yourself with the code base. How do you go about doing that when you're joining, and I guess realistically, like, how long does that take as well? Because some people, I guess it's going to depend on the company, but what's the kind of expectation from a company as well as to how long that's going to take you?
Yeah, I think that this is probably the most specific to a company or a project or a team within a company. For being an agency, we have a number of different projects, and so when we onboard new developers, we'll onboard them to one, even two teams at a time, two projects at a time, and those two can be vastly different. They can be wildly different onboarding experiences. But I think that there are a few steps that you can do as a new developer, as a junior developer even, to try to gain as much understanding of the code base as quickly as possible. The first one would be to read the documentation. This is obviously not helpful if there is no good documentation or if the documentation is very lacking. However, it can be very valuable even if it has terrible documentation. It as a fresh set of eyes on those docs on that README, you can highlight areas where there's inconsistencies or there's information missing. Like, did you follow the setup instructions and they didn't work? And there's different versions than what is actually running, that sort of thing. So I would say read the documentation, but make sure to keep a list of things that are wrong about the documentation or missing, because that's going to be valuable later. It's going to be a way for you to showcase your value and your contribution. Once you do have an app up and running and you've read the docs, I would say trying to understand the architecture of the application, you can do a few things. You can look at data flow. You can and try to create your own data flow diagrams. So, like, what's the event that the user is doing? What kind of requests is that triggering, and what information is being asked for and returned to the user. So if you can map out data throughout a system, that'll be really great because it'll put you on a bunch of different layers throughout the app. Of course, if it's a giant application, that's easier said than done, but you can do it piece by piece of different concerns, I suppose. Same with user experience and components. Like if you're working in a React app, you can do a component diagram. Any kind of application, you can do a UX diagram. Just try and map out what the user flow is for a number of different paths. Those are really important. Those are things to do, like if you find that you have free time and your assigned onboarding tasks are done and you haven't really heard much from. Just a couple other things. You can look at the tests, look at their test suites, assuming that they have good tests. That should tell you a lot about what the application is doing. And then specifically end-to-end testing, if they've got any sort of end-to-end testing set up, because those generally follow some sort of user flow that's important to the business. So if they're testing like a form sign up from landing page to like, thanks for signing up, like if you can follow that test flow, that will help tell you a lot about what this application, what the stakeholders of the application think is important.
And all of this stuff, are we talking like within hours, days, weeks, months of starting? Like, is this kind of like within a first month trying to get all this done, or?
I would say within the first month you can do a lot of this stuff. Yeah. And again, it really depends on the management style and the freedom. This is sort of assuming like you have a lot of time for onboarding, you're not thrown into the code and assigned tasks right away, and you don't have like a ton of assigned onboarding tasks. So this is all stuff that to do outside of the work that you've been assigned to do. But I think that like depending on the application, of course, a data flow diagram is something that maybe even a very experienced developer may take months to finish. So that's something that you kind of have to use your best judgment and be like, all right, if the purpose of this is for me to understand the architecture of the application, like I don't necessarily need to map out every single call from every single view or something like that. But just a general idea of like what data is this app using and where and why. And the same with the UX. Like you probably don't want to do every single potential user interaction on that application or that website, because that would be overkill. But if you can do general ones to get a better understanding of how users use it, then that's great. And maybe this is all unnecessary because your company has really good onboarding tools and steps already in place. And so they are going to be walking you through this and you won't have to be doing this.
It's good because I think some companies are great, but some companies are minimal, and some companies, they might be onboarding someone remotely for the first time, and they might be onboarding someone junior for the first time, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to be prepared to how to deal with that. And I think a lot of that you can get through in the interview as to how many junior people have you onboarded before, and what are my
Right.
first 30, 60, 90 days like look like, and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think like you said, like maybe within the first month trying to get as much of that stuff done as possible, but
Right.
alongside the stuff that you're assigned, right? I don't want you getting messages being like, Ben, my boss was shouting at me because I was making a component diagram whilst I was supposed to be
Right.
doing this other thing. Like,
Right. Exactly.
so yeah, that makes
Bugs are
sense.
another good one. Like if you can, if you're at a place where you're getting assigned issues, ask for bugs, especially like non-urgent ones, because like that's a good way to like, have to trace through a stack different issues and touch a little different, a bunch of different layers, or investigate a bunch of different layers. And also, it can show you like common problem areas, so you familiarize yourself with not only the ways that the application is working well, but areas that the developers and even users have historically struggled with it.
For sure. So then obviously being like a new member of a team where you don't know everyone, like I think like I have this when people work for me, I had this when I worked in other organizations. Like you can be a little bit worried about annoying people and like who to go to about sort of like asking questions and the right way to do it without annoying people. Like
Mhm.
what advice would you have around that?
I would say don't worry about annoying people. As a hiring manager, as a general, just as a team manager, what's most annoying for me is when people don't ask for help. Um, and if I have to tell someone, hey, tone it down a little bit, that's great. That's never coming from like a place of reprimand. That's coming from a, like, this is really good, and we just need to chill for a little bit because you're a little too eager.
Yeah,
But if that is something that you're concerned about, as I know it's a lot of people are concerned about it, I would say bring it up with your manager or a onboarding buddy and just ask for what the common communication style and tools are at the company. So if you are concerned that you're interrupting someone's flow and you don't want to like bug the senior dev for the setup issue, at a time when you know that they're not busy, you could say, hey, I'm going to be working on this. I'm anticipating some problems. Is there a time of day that you prefer to be um, message? Do you prefer Slack or Jira comments or email, or how do you want me to reach out to you? Can we set up a pairing schedule? That's a big one. If you can ask your manager or a more senior dev to have like regular pairing times on the calendar for the first few weeks with you, that's really big, because then you can, if it's not an urgent issue, you can save your questions for those times and have them answered without feeling like you're interrupting some impressive senior dev's workflow and they're going to be pissed at you.
yeah, for sure. I think like you said, I think the majority of it is around like being proactive is always going to be a positive thing. And I think if people are getting too much from you in terms of questions or whatever, I think like you said, like working out a way that works best for them to go back to them. Like I have sort of like urgent and non-urgent things, and my non-urgent things go to like the end of the day and I'll come back to them at
Mhm.
the end of the day. So also knowing the expectations on when you're going to hit back on some things, I
Mhm.
guess it is to a good thing to work out as well.
Yeah,
But I think yeah, it much more annoys me if people don't ask me anything than ask me too much, right?
exactly. And I would keep in mind that as a junior developer, if a senior developer thinks that you're bugging them or annoying them, they're going to tell your manager, and that becomes your manager's issue, not
Yeah,
your issue. And if they're a good manager, they're going to talk about it with you, and they're going to suggest different ways, like pairing schedules or calendar blocking for you both to communicate when it's appropriate to talk. And so yeah, so don't try to do your manager's job in that sense. Come in as a junior and be like, my job is to absorb as much information from the team and from the documentation as I can until I'm told to do otherwise.
sure. And then that leads on quite nicely. So let's talk about my relationship with my manager as
Okay.
as a new junior developer. How do I make sure going into this job that I make the most out of sort of the time that I do have with them? Because like you said, they are going to be busy. Like I'm not necessarily going to be their number one priority. I might get more time with them during my like first few days or week,
Mhm.
but obviously then it's going to be limited, particularly not getting face to face time in the office if it's a remote role, in
Right.
particular. So how do I kind of make the most of the time that I do get with them?
Yeah, I would say that this again comes back to sort of not being afraid to advocate for yourself and not being concerned about being annoying or, um, I mean, you want to be respectful. You don't want to be interrupting someone all the time, especially your boss. But generally, I think it's better to be more vocal to your new manager than to just disappear, especially in a remote position. Um, so I would say before you even start, a good thing to do would be to ask for a bunch of meetings. If they haven't already scheduled those. So ask for your one-on-one schedule. Um, ask for the agenda of those one-on-ones before the meetings start. You can also ask, and you should be asking for the calendar invites for those meetings well in advance of the meetings. So let's say that it's like a bi-weekly one-on-one. Those should just be on the calendar as a repeating event. And if they're not, and the manager is like, oh yeah, every other week I'll reach out to you and we'll schedule some time to talk. Be like, hey, that's cool. Can we just pick a day and a time? And maybe they, I mean, most managers will say yes, I would think, I would hope. But if they don't, maybe you can create the kind of event. And then if they need to
Yeah.
cancel or change it, who cares? At least you're trying.
I think it's
Um,
better to have something on there, right, and then move it.
exactly.
So, like, if you're
Yeah.
like, oh, how about we do every other Wednesday? I'll put it in for 3. If you need to push it slightly, let me know. And then at least it's in there. And if it gets moved by a
Right.
day, at least it happens, as opposed to like you don't hear from them for 2 weeks and then you message them and then maybe you miss a week because it can't be
Hmm.
scheduled to the following week. I think just having something on there, and I think they'll appreciate you even little things like taking the 20 seconds it takes to do a recurring calendar invite can seem like a massive favor if you're really
Right.
busy, right?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, I mean, this is, classic example of managing up, right? Like making sure that your manager is doing their job for you well. And I think a lot of people really struggle with this because they think it might come across poorly or the manager might be offended by it. I'm sure there's cases where that's will happen, but that's a bad manager, just FYI. And if a team member like takes the initiative to schedule the meeting that we talked about already, and just does that, great. That's one less thing that I have to do as their manager, and they've already picked the time and the location, so to speak, for me. And I'm like, great, cool, you did it. I don't have to even worry about it. We'll just meet next Wednesday. But I would say also, for the first 3 months, especially, don't be afraid to ask for what you need as a new developer and as a new team member. So, for instance, like say you do get those one-on-one scheduled, but you tend to show up and there's no agenda and it's just sort of like, I don't know what we're supposed to be talking about. Like I said earlier, ask for an agenda before every meeting, or propose one. Say like, hey, here's 3 topics that I've noticed in the past 2 weeks onboarding that I think we should discuss, and send that a couple of days in advance, and that might prompt your manager to add on to that list. Um, I would say also asking for direct feedback, especially at the like 30, 60, 90 day way, is very shows that you care about your performance, and especially if you phrase it like, is there any way that I can be onboarding faster, and or I can be providing more value to the company. So when you're asking for feedback, don't just ask for like, oh, I need this for my own validation or my own peace of mind. Do it be like, hey, I know there's probably things that I'm still not doing correctly. Like, what are those things? I want to fix them so that I can, help the team succeed even better than it already is.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it also depends sometimes, doesn't it, on the manager that you're dealing with. You might be in your first job and you might be reporting into a manager who's their first management job. And
Sure.
I think you've got to take it as take it as sort of face value as to
Hmm.
whether they've done it before, and I think there's a big difference, like you said, between a bad manager and a disorganized manager as well.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm definitely at least one of those two. So so people doing little things like helping you get organized and sending calendar invites and taking things off your plate, like it's brilliant to do things like that, and
Yeah.
can obviously help the relationship a lot. And I guess then let's talk about after kind of being onboarded. Like, I've had my first 90 days or whatever. I've done all of the above. Know roughly what I'm expected to do on a sort of day-to-day basis. Got my head around the majority of things internally. Like, what can I kind of expect to happen next?
Well, hopefully you will then start diving into the code, right? Like, especially if you have been, poking around already, onboarding yourself with some of those earlier techniques that we talked about, maybe even resolving a few bugs from the backlog. Yeah, I would assume then you start getting some feature development or some maintenance task tickets, something like that. Generally, teams I've seen like to sort of ramp up the impact of the work that you're doing. So, especially if you're a junior and you're new, don't expect to be building out like the brand new feature that's launching in 2 weeks. But you might be, uh, fixing some security patches or updating some versions of some gems or npm packages or something like that, which makes kind of seem like busy work. But basically, what that means is like they are wanting you to contribute. They want your value being added to the project, and we want to make sure that like we're sort of easing you into your contribution level so that you're not in over your head, or you're not asked to do something that is either out of your skill set or is something that you need a better understanding of the application to do. um, I would say, aside from the actual project work, uh, there's a couple of things that you could be doing or you should expect to be doing. One of them is starting to contribute to the company culture. You can do this through attending meetings, having one-on-ones, having meetings with just team members or other people in the company. You don't have to work with them directly to schedule a meeting. And in fact, if your onboarding process didn't include some sort of like meet and greet type of meetings, you could advocate for those yourselves, or just reach out to people on Slack and be like, hey, I haven't met you yet. Seems like we'll probably interact at some point. Let's get on Zoom for 20 minutes or so and just chat. Um, you can also contribute to the company culture more systemically. We talked about adding or creating that list of questions for documentation. You could be doing that during your onboarding process as well for internal docs. And once you feel confident and comfortable in your new role, maybe a couple of weeks in, maybe a few months in, you could start suggesting those changes. And that's actually a really great way to not only be like proactive in providing value, but um, demonstrating that like, oh yeah, I care about the experience here, especially the developer experience at this company. And if you're like, hey, this project I just worked on, this README is full of inconsistencies or missing information, would you like me to update that and submit a PR? It's amazing. Like that's a very impressive thing to hear from a new developer on the team, and especially a junior developer.
Yeah, sure. So then again, kind of finish the onboarding, and like that's going to go one or two ways, right? Like, it's either going to go really well and you're going to be working for a company that is like continually trying to improve their onboarding, and continuing to kind of seek out feedback on it, or it might be a new startup or just a company that hasn't onboarded anyone in a while, and it's gone badly. So like, how do you go about, I guess, giving constructive feedback to kind of how that's gone, kind of after the fact?
Sure. I would say that if it's direct feedback, um, just take it to your manager for one. Like, don't be afraid of using that one-on-one time to discuss ways that your uh, your onboarding experience wasn't ideal. You could phrase it in a way if you're concerned about hurting someone's feelings or being perceived as complaining. You could frame it in a way of like, for future new hires, here's what I would change about the onboarding process. Again, that shows a proactive mindset, and it shows that you're thinking about not just yourself, and you're not just like complaining, but uh, you're trying to change the process so that it's better for the next person. Um, Also, I think that if you are contributing to the culture and the company in those sort of documentation or process improvements ways, that's kind of an indirect way uh, to affect that change and bring up those issues as well. So you might not even have to say like, "Hey, my specific experience was bad in this way." You could say, "Hey, this was inaccurate," or this was incomplete. Here's some information I think should be added to it to make it better. And that's very objective. It sort of takes your personal experience out of it, and it's just like, the version in this README is wrong. Like, we should update it for the next person so that they don't struggle, or they don't have to bug the senior dev to figure out
Yeah,
what it actually should be.
for sure. I guess the only other thing would be if you're mid bad onboarding experience? Like, do you kind of write it out and then go back afterwards and be like this wasn't great, like all of that kind of thing, or like can you bring that up in your one to ones and be like, I don't feel like I'm getting enough of this. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
seen, particularly if you know that onboarding it. So, for example, someone from your boot camp is being onboarded at another company really well. Would you be like, they
Mm-hmm.
do it like this, like over here? Because that's a tough thing to do during like a probation period, right?
It can be, yeah, and obviously this all has to, this all kind of, it all kind of depends on how you're framing these conversations.
Yeah,
If you show up to your one-on-one and be like, "Excuse me, I have a friend over at company XYZ, and they're doing it so much better than you guys are doing it here," that's maybe not the best way to approach it. But if you were to say, "Hey, I was just talking with my cohort mate, and they were telling me about this really cool thing that they're doing, and I just wondered if you ever thought about doing that, or maybe we could try it out with me. I'm happy to be the guinea pig." Like,
yeah,
frame it in a way that you're trying to push for growth and for improvement. I would say that most managers uh, aren't going to look poorly on someone who's like advocating for improving a process, especially if they are willing to take up some of the grunt work of improving that process themselves, such as updating documentation so it's more accurate or more complete. Um, Otherwise, I would say if you're in a crappy onboarding situation and you're right smack dab in the middle, uh, either depending on your relationship with your new manager, you could, bite your tongue and keep those lists until it's over. If you feel like your manager seems very stressed and might not take it very well right at the moment, you wait until there's a more calm moment. Um, or you can talk about it with them in a one-on-one, and like I said earlier, frame it as you wanting to be more valuable and productive in your role for the company. Be like, "Hey, I feel like the onboarding to this project hasn't been the best. I'm still not quite sure of what the app does or what I'm supposed to be doing on there, and I'm just wondering if there's anything else we could do so that like I can start helping my teammates working on this project." No manager wants to like hire someone and then hear that that person doesn't feel like they're doing anything.
yeah,
And the manager's bosses certainly don't want to hear that, they just hired someone that is not contributing anything to the company, especially after a few months. So if you can frame it as like, "I don't really feel like I'm doing much yet. I haven't been assigned anything. or the onboarding process hasn't been really clear in that regard. Like, can you be more specific in what I should be doing? That's more of a safe way of approaching that topic mid onboarding experience.
Amazing. Well, Ben, thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it, and yeah, hope to chat to you again soon. For anyone listening, thank you so much. We're going to be trying to put these out every couple of weeks on different topics. If you have any follow up questions for myself, for Ben, about anything particular on the topic of onboarding, please email podcast@thedeveloperlink.io. Same for kind of future suggestions of things you would like to hear more about. Please do drop us a message, and yeah, we'll see you again next time. Thanks, Ben.
All right, thank you, Chris. Lovely speaking with you.
All right, I'm going to click stop, and then